The sun beat down that Sunday, making the small seaside diner shimmer like gold. Michael watched his daughter, Emily, a spirited 4-year-old, play with the plastic cutlery, creating a childish and carefree rhythm. This lunch was an attempt to maintain normalcy, a routine they had struggled to establish since their lives were turned upside down. It had been a year and a half since Sarah, Michael's wife and Emily's mother, had passed away, leaving an immense void in their lives. Michael ran a hand through his hair, already prematurely gray, a reflection of the grief and longing that consumed him day after day. Each small gesture from Emily, every word, every smile, brought back the memory of Sarah, like a sweet and painful ghost. That diner, with its sea breeze and the sound of the waves, was one of Sarah's favorite places, and that's why they kept coming back, trying to find a piece of her there. But the absence was stubborn, present in every corner, in every empty chair, in every dish she no longer ordered. Emily, oblivious to her father's melancholy, asked for strawberry ice cream, the same as her mother always chose, and her brown eyes sparkled with the same intensity as Sarah's, tightening the knot in Michael's throat even more. The waiter approached with the dessert menu, but before Michael could choose, Emily straightened up in her chair, pointing across the street with wide eyes. "Daddy, look!" she exclaimed, her voice full of excitement. "That lady looks just like Mommy." Michael felt his heart skip a beat. He turned to look, expecting to see just another one of his daughter's fantasies, one of those innocent confusions that children have. But what he saw across the street left him paralyzed. A woman dressed in dusty and worn clothes sat on a park bench, staring fixedly at the sea. Her hair, brown and disheveled, still held the same dark shade that Michael knew so well. The profile of her face, even from a distance, was incredibly familiar, and a wave of shock ran through his body. It was as if time had turned back, as if Sarah were there, across the street, in a distorted and unrecognizable version. Without thinking twice, Michael got up from the table, leaving Emily confused and the waiter bewildered. "Stay here, sweetie. Daddy will be right back," he said, his voice choked with emotion and disbelief. He made a quick gesture to the waiter to keep an eye on Emily and crossed the street with hesitant steps, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. With each step closer, the impossible hope that it might actually be Sarah flickered in his mind, only to be extinguished by the cold logic of reality. It couldn't be her. He knew that. But the woman's posture, the way she tilted her head, even the faded floral pattern of her dress, all of it echoed Sarah with an eerie precision. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and he almost stumbled. "Sarah?" he called out softly, the name escaping his lips like a prayer, even though he knew how utterly impossible it was. The woman startled and turned around, her eyes widening in recognition. They weren't Sarah's eyes, not exactly, but they held a spark of something deeply familiar, something that sent a shiver down Michael's spine. It was like looking at a distorted reflection, a fractured memory. "Michael?" she responded, her voice hoarse, as if she hadn't used it in a long time. "Michael Evans?" The name hung in the air, heavy with unspoken years and unanswered questions. Then, like a lightning bolt, the memory struck him. "Claire?" he asked, finally recognizing Sarah's former college roommate. The same Claire who had mysteriously disappeared years ago, leaving Sarah visibly shaken and heartbroken at the time. The same Claire whose sudden departure had cast a shadow over their final years of college, a shadow that Michael had never fully understood. Claire's face, though marked by time and hardship, still retained traces of the vibrant young woman he had known so long ago. Her eyes, despite the evident weariness, held a familiar glimmer, even if it was much dimmer now. A wave of confusion and a strange sense of unease washed over Michael as he tried to reconcile the image before him with the ghost of the past. What had happened to her? Where had she been all these years? "I can't believe it," she murmured, running a trembling hand over her face, as if trying to convince herself that she wasn't dreaming. "It's been so long." Michael sat down, next to her on the bench, still reeling from the encounter. Across the street, unnoticed by him, his mother-in-law, Eleanor, had just arrived at the diner for a surprise visit to her granddaughter. She stood frozen at the entrance, observing the scene with a tense and worried expression etched on her face. The joy of the intended visit with Emily and Michael evaporated, replaced by a growing unease as she watched her son-in-law in deep conversation with the disheveled woman. Eleanor's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of the past, the memories she had desperately tried to bury. A knot of apprehension tightened in her stomach. "Claire, what happened to you?" Michael began, his voice laced with a mixture of concern and disbelief. "You just vanished. One day you were there and the next you were gone." Sarah was devastated. He paused, searching Claire's face for answers. We never understood why. But he was interrupted by a cheerful shout from across the street. "Daddy, my ice cream's here." Emily waved from the diner window, her face smeared with pink. Claire followed Michael's gaze to the little girl, and her eyes softened. "She's the image of Sarah," she said quietly, and there was something in her voice that Michael couldn't quite decipher. A mix of tenderness and guilt, perhaps, or a deep-seated sadness that spoke volumes about her own hidden pain. The encounter was stirring up emotions and questions that Michael had long suppressed, threatening to unravel the carefully constructed piece he had found after Sarah's death. "We need to talk," Michael said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a business card. He handed it to Claire, his fingers brushing against hers. Her skin was rough, calloused, a far cry from the soft hands he remembered. "This is my number, please call me. There's so much we need to understand." Claire took the card with trembling hands, nodding slightly. Her gaze lingered on Michael's face for a moment, a flicker of something unreadable passing between them. It was as if the years had melted away, leaving behind the echoes of a shared past, a past filled with laughter, dreams, and a bond that had once seemed unbreakable. But the present was harsh and unforgiving, a stark contrast to the faded memories. When Michael returned to the diner, he found Emily happily savoring her strawberry ice cream, oblivious to the emotional turmoil her father had just experienced. But sitting at the table with a stiff posture and an unreadable expression was Eleanor. She had witnessed the entire encounter from the entrance, and her eyes held a mixture of shock, confusion, and a deep-seated unease that Michael couldn't quite place. The air around her crackled with unspoken tension, a silent warning that the past was about to resurface, bringing with it secrets and revelations that could shatter the fragile peace they had built. The simple act of sharing ice cream with his daughter had suddenly become a scene fraught with complexity and the weight of untold stories. That night, after putting Emily to bed, Michael couldn't shake the encounter with Claire from his mind. The image of her sitting on that park bench, a ghost from his past, haunted his thoughts. He sat in his study, surrounded by old college photographs, his fingers tracing the faded edges of shared memories. In one photo, Sarah and Claire stood arm in arm, beaming with youthful exuberance, wearing their graduation gowns. The contrast between that image and the Claire he had seen today was stark and unsettling. It was as if two different people inhabited the same body, separated by a chasm of years and experiences. A shiver ran down his spine as a sense of foreboding crept into his heart, a feeling that this unexpected reunion was about to unleash a torrent of long-buried emotions and secrets. The sound of the doorbell shattered his reverie. It was Eleanor, who had insisted on returning after dinner for a serious conversation. Her face was drawn and pale, her usual composure replaced by a visible anxiety that made Michael's stomach clench. "Michael, we need to talk about what happened today," she began, sitting down in the living room armchair without waiting for an invitation. Her voice was tight, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "You shouldn't have given that woman your contact information." The possessive way she referred to Claire raised a red flag in Michael's mind, a subtle hint of a deeper connection between Eleanor and the events of the past. The air in the room thickened with unspoken accusations and the weight of unresolved history. "Eleanor," Michael replied, his voice calm but firm, trying to diffuse the rising tension. "Claire was Sarah's best friend in college. What exactly do you know about what happened between them? Because until today, I had no idea why Sarah cut her out of her life." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "There has to be a reason, and I think it's time I knew it." The weight of the past pressed down on them, a heavy silence filling the room as Eleanor's carefully constructed defenses began to crumble under Michael's persistent questioning. He was determined to unearth the truth, no matter how painful. driven by a need to understand the shadows that had haunted Sarah and the secrets that still lingered between them. Eleanor avoided his gaze, her hands twisting nervously in her lap, clutching her purse as if it were a lifeline. "There are things from the past that are better left buried, Michael," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Carolina had her reasons for pushing Claire away from her life. The use of Sarah's given name, Carolina, instead of the more familiar Sarah, felt deliberate, a subtle attempt to distance herself from the intimacy of the past. But Michael wasn't deterred. "What reasons?" he insisted, sitting directly in front of her, his eyes searching hers for any flicker of honesty. "I deserve to know." Sarah never explained why they lost contact, Michael pressed, his voice unwavering. "She always changed the subject whenever I asked. It was like there was this invisible wall between us whenever Claire's name came up." He paused, his gaze softening. "I need to understand, Eleanor. For Emily's sake, for my own. This woman was a significant part of Sarah's life, and now she's back. I can't just ignore that." The need for closure, for a complete picture of his wife's past, drove him forward, pushing him to confront the uncomfortable truths that Eleanor seemed so desperate to keep hidden. Eleanor took a deep breath, as if weighing each word before speaking. The silence stretched, thick with anticipation. "My daughter made me promise I would never tell you," she finally confessed, her voice barely audible. "But the circumstances have changed." She looked up at Michael, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resignation. Sarah discovered something about Claire, something that frightened her deeply. She said she couldn't take any risks. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication, painting a picture of a past far more complex and dangerous than Michael had ever imagined. The image of Sarah's close-knit college friendship shattered, replaced by a chilling sense of betrayal and fear. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, casting a long shadow over the room. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of risks?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The image of Sarah, his usually calm and collected wife, being genuinely afraid of someone was deeply unsettling. He couldn't reconcile the Sarah he knew with the idea of her being threatened or in danger. The comfortable world he had built for himself and Emily was beginning to feel fragile, threatened by the intrusion of this unknown element from the past. "I don't know the specific details," Eleanor replied, her gaze still averted. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of knowledge, that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. It was as if she were guarding a secret, protecting someone or something from the light. "All I know is that it was something serious enough to make my daughter, who was the most loyal person I've ever known, cut off all ties with her best friend." The weight of those words settled heavily in the room, filling the silence with a sense of unease and unanswered questions. Michael felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling that he was on the verge of uncovering a truth that would shatter his perception of the past. The silence that followed was abruptly broken by the sound of small footsteps in the hallway. Emily appeared at the doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. "Grandma!" she exclaimed, running into Eleanor's arms, her face lighting up with childish joy. Eleanor's tense expression softened instantly as she embraced her granddaughter. "My love, shouldn't you be asleep?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Despite the turmoil of the previous conversation, the innocence of Emily's presence served as a stark reminder of the stakes involved, the fragile world he was trying to protect from the encroaching shadows of the past. "I had a dream about Mommy," Emily said, snuggling into Eleanor's lap. She was smiling just like that lady today. Michael and Eleanor exchanged a look filled with concern. The grandmother hugged her granddaughter tighter, as if trying to shield her from something unseen. "Michael," Eleanor said in a low voice while gently stroking Emily's hair, who was starting to drift back to sleep. "I know you're trying to rebuild your life, and seeing someone who resembles Sarah must have been unsettling, but think carefully before you bring the past back. Some doors once opened can't be closed again." Her words carried a weight of warning, a plea to leave the mysteries buried, but it was already too late. The seed of curiosity had been planted, and Michael was determined to see where it would lead, but it was too late. That very night, while Emily slept soundly and Eleanor had already left, Michael's phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "Can we meet tomorrow? There's so much we need to discuss." Claire. The simple text message was like a match thrown into a powder keg, igniting a whirlwind of conflicting emotions within him. He looked at the framed photo of Sarah on his nightstand, the one where she smiled radiantly, holding newborn Emily in her arms. A sense of unease settled over him. Something deep down told him that there was far more to this story than anyone was willing to admit, that the carefully constructed narrative of the past was about to crumble. And now, after 18 months of painstakingly piecing together the shattered fragments of his life, he realized that he might not have known the whole truth about the woman he had married, the woman he had loved with an unwavering intensity, the woman whose memory he cherished with a desperate devotion. The comfortable certainty he had clung to was slipping away, replaced by a growing suspicion that the past held secrets that could redefine his present and reshape his future. The encounter with Claire had opened a Pandora's box, unleashing a torrent of questions that demanded answers, no matter how painful or unsettling they might be. The coffee shop downtown was nearly empty that Monday morning. A light rain drizzled outside, painting the windows with streaks of moisture, mirroring the uncertainty that clouded Michael's mind. He arrived first, choosing a secluded table in the back of the establishment, seeking a semblance of privacy for the impending conversation. His hands drummed nervously on the tabletop as he waited for Claire, who had agreed to meet him at 9 a.m. The silence of the cafe was punctuated only by the gentle hum of the espresso machine and the rhythmic ticking of a clock on the wall, each second amplifying Michael's growing anticipation and apprehension. He wondered what Claire would reveal, what secrets she held, and how those revelations would reshape his understanding of the past. Claire arrived promptly, dressed in simple but clean clothes that looked borrowed. Her hair was pulled back in a makeshift bun, and she carried a worn purse close to her body. As Michael saw her in the daylight, he noticed how the years had been harsh on her, etching lines of hardship on her face and stealing the youthful glow he remembered. Yet he also perceived that behind the marks of time, the same gentleness lingered in her eyes, a faint echo of the spirited young woman he once knew. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over him: pity, curiosity, a strange sense of nostalgia, and a lingering unease that warned him to tread carefully. This encounter was more than just a reunion. It was a journey into the heart of a mystery that had remained unsolved for far too long. "I'm sorry if I'm not very presentable," she said, sitting down. "A kind woman from the church helped me with these clothes when she heard about our meeting." Her voice was soft, almost apologetic, and Michael felt a pang of sympathy for the woman she had become. The stark contrast between the Claire he remembered and the Claire sitting before him was a jarring reminder of the unpredictable and often cruel nature of life. He pushed aside his discomfort and focused on the task at hand. He needed answers, and he needed them now. The past was knocking on his door, and he could no longer ignore its insistent call. Michael signaled to the waitress and ordered coffee for both of them. "Claire, what happened to you?" he asked, his voice gentle but insistent. "How did you end up in this situation?" He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "You were always so full of life, so ambitious. What went wrong?" He wanted to understand the trajectory of her life, the path that had led her from the vibrant halls of their college campus to the desperate circumstances he had witnessed the day before. The mystery surrounding her disappearance had haunted him for years, and now, finally, he had a chance to unravel it. Claire wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, as if seeking solace and warmth from its simple heat. "It's a long story, Michael," she said, her gaze fixed on the swirling liquid. After I left, I went to care for my grandfather. He had Alzheimer's, and he needed constant care." Her voice was tinged with a hint of bitterness, a suggestion of dreams deferred and sacrifices made. The vibrant, ambitious Claire he remembered had been replaced by a woman weathered by responsibility and loss, a stark reminder of how drastically life can alter one's course. Michael listened intently, sensing the weight of untold burdens in her words, the unspoken story of a life derailed by circumstances beyond her control. "I abandoned my career, my dreams," Claire continued, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 years, dedicated exclusively to him. She finally looked up at Michael, her eyes searching his. "But why did you leave so suddenly?" Michael pressed, his voice laced with urgency. "Sarah was devastated at the time. One day you were inseparable and the next you were gone. It made no sense." He paused, his gaze softening. "Did Sarah ever tell you anything about why you two drifted apart?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years of unanswered questions and lingering pain. Claire took a deep breath, her eyes welling up with unshed tears. The weight of the past seemed to press down on her, the years of silence and separation taking their toll. "I've kept a letter all these years," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "It was among the few things I managed to hold on to." She reached into her worn purse and retrieved a yellowed envelope, its edges frayed with time and handling. Her fingers trembled as she offered it to Michael. "Sarah gave it to me the day before I disappeared." The revelation hung in the air, charged with unspoken significance. This letter, a relic of a broken friendship, held the key to unlocking the mystery of their estrangement, a mystery that had cast a long shadow over Michael's life and his memories of Sarah. Michael took the envelope with trembling hands, recognizing Sarah's handwriting immediately. The familiar script, once a source of comfort and love, now held the potential to unleash a torrent of painful truths. "I haven't read it yet," he said, his voice barely a whisper, his gaze fixed on the unopened letter. "I know what it says by heart," Claire replied, her voice almost a sigh. "Sarah asked me to leave. She said it was for the best, that she couldn't take any risks. At the time, I didn't fully understand, but I obeyed. She was my best friend, and if she was asking me to do this, it had to be for a very strong reason." Her words were laced with a mixture of sadness and resignation, a testament to the enduring power of their bond, even in its fractured state. Michael carefully opened the envelope, his hands trembling slightly as he unfolded the letter. The paper was thin and fragile, the ink faded with time, yet the words still held the power to wound and reveal. Sarah's handwriting, so familiar and yet now so distant, seemed to leap off the page, carrying with it the weight of her unspoken fears and the secrets she had carried to her grave. He braced himself, ready to confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be, determined to finally understand the reasons behind the broken friendship and the lingering mystery that had shrouded Sarah's past. The silence in the cafe deepened, broken only by the soft rustle of the paper as Michael began to read. "Claire, you need to leave," Sarah's words began, stark and direct. "I can't explain everything right now, but trust me. If you stay, everything I've built could crumble. Please do this for me. Disappear." The plea was filled with a desperate urgency that resonated across the years, a chilling glimpse into the fear that had driven Sarah's decision. Michael's mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of his wife, the woman he knew as loving and kind, with the woman who had written these harsh and cryptic words. What could have been so terrible, so threatening, that it would force Sarah to sever ties with her closest friend? The mystery deepened, pulling Michael further into a labyrinth of unanswered questions and unsettling possibilities. "Disappear," Claire repeated softly, her voice echoing the finality of Sarah's words. Just like that. No explanation, no goodbye. It was as if I never existed in her life. A single tear escaped her eye and traced a path down her weathered cheek. "It was like losing a sister, Michael. We were inseparable, and then, suddenly, she was gone." The pain in her voice was palpable, a testament to the enduring wound left by Sarah's abrupt departure. Michael watched her, his heart aching, for the woman who had lost so much and for the wife he had never fully understood. The carefully constructed narrative of Sarah's life was unraveling before his eyes, revealing a hidden layer of complexity and pain. "After my grandfather passed away," Claire continued, her voice regaining a fragile composure, "I tried to get back into my field, but it had been years since I'd been active. No one wanted to give me a chance." She shrugged, a gesture of resignation. "I fell into a depression, lost my apartment, and before I knew it, I was on the streets." The starkness of her confession hung in the air, a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of loss and isolation. Michael stared at her, his mind reeling from the weight of her story. The stark contrast between her past and present, a testament to the unpredictable nature of fate. Michael folded the letter slowly, his mind struggling to process all the information. The weight of Sarah's words, the pain in Claire's voice, and the lingering questions about the past created a whirlwind of confusion and unease within him. "Why didn't you seek help?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of accusation. "Why didn't you reach out to me or Sarah? We would have helped you." He couldn't reconcile the image of the Claire he knew with the woman who had fallen so far, so silently. The thought that they could have prevented her suffering, that they had been so close and yet so unaware, was a heavy burden to bear. "Her letter was very clear, Michael," Claire replied, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "She didn't want me around. And then, well, then I heard she had passed away. It was like losing the ground beneath my feet all over again." The grief in her eyes mirrored the grief that still lingered in Michael's heart, a shared pain that connected them in an unexpected and unsettling way. The past was no longer a distant memory. It was a living presence in the room, demanding to be acknowledged and, understood. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with unspoken grief and the weight of a shared past. Michael watched Claire, noticing how she nervously played with the spoon in her coffee cup. It was a habit that Sarah had also possessed, a small, unconscious gesture that connected Claire to his memories of his late wife in an unexpected and poignant way. The familiarity of the action stirred a confusing mix of emotions within him, a sense of longing, a pang of guilt, and a growing recognition that the past was more intertwined with the present than he had ever realized. He wondered what Sarah would think of this meeting, of the unexpected reunion with the woman she had once called her best friend. "Emily asked about you last night," he said softly, breaking the silence. "She said you look like her mom." Claire's eyes softened at the mention of the little girl's name. A faint smile touched her lips, a brief flicker of warmth in the midst of her sadness. "She's beautiful, Michael," she said quietly. "She has Sarah's eyes." The shared connection through Emily, the living embodiment of Sarah's legacy, created a fragile bridge between them, a reminder of the enduring power of love and loss. Michael felt a pull towards Claire, a sense of shared history and a desire to understand the woman she had become, but also a lingering loyalty to Sarah and the memory of their life together. "Claire," Michael began hesitantly, a proposition forming in his mind, both audacious and compassionate. "I have a proposal for you. I need someone to care for Emily." He paused, searching her eyes for any sign of rejection or disbelief. "Someone who can stay at home with her, give her attention, affection. I have a spare room that's empty." The idea had sprung from a deep-seated instinct, a need to fill the void in Emily's life and a desire to offer Claire a lifeline, a chance to rebuild her shattered existence. It was a risk, he knew, but something about Claire's presence resonated with him, a sense of shared loss and a fragile connection that transcended the years. Claire's eyes widened, surprise evident on her face. "Michael, I can't," she stammered, shaking her head. "You don't know me anymore. You don't know what's happened to me in all these years." A wave of self-doubt washed over her, the weight of her past casting a long shadow over her present. "And your mother-in-law, Eleanor, she wouldn't approve." The objections tumbled out, fueled by a deep-seated insecurity and a fear of rejection. She couldn't believe that Michael, this successful and kind man, would offer her such a chance, such a lifeline. It felt too good to be true, a fleeting dream that would inevitably shatter. "Eleanor doesn't need to approve my decisions," Michael interrupted firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Emily needs someone who can understand her, someone who has a connection to her mother's past." He reached out and gently took Claire's hands in his gaze unwavering. "And you need a chance to start over, a chance to rebuild your life, to find a sense of purpose again." He saw the flicker of hope in her eyes, a fragile spark ignited by his unexpected offer. He knew it was a gamble, a leap of faith, but he trusted his instincts, believing that this unconventional arrangement could bring healing and redemption to them both. Tears began to stream down Claire's face, her composure finally breaking under the weight of his kindness and the sheer improbability of the situation. "Why are you doing this, Michael?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You barely know me anymore." She couldn't comprehend his generosity, his willingness to trust her after all these years of silence and uncertainty. It felt like a miracle, a lifeline thrown to her in her darkest hour, and she clung to it with a desperate gratitude. The rain outside intensified, mirroring the torrent of emotions within the cafe, washing away the grime of the streets and perhaps offering a symbolic cleansing of their shared past. "Because something tells me there's more to this story than meets the eye," Michael replied, his voice firm and unwavering. He paused, his gaze softening as he looked at Claire, his expression filled with a mixture of compassion and a lingering sense of mystery. "And because yesterday was the first time in 18 months that I saw Emily smile like that when she looked at someone." He saw a flicker of recognition in Claire's eyes, a shared understanding of the profound impact she had had on his daughter, a connection that transcended the boundaries of their shared past. The rain outside intensified, mirroring the emotional intensity within the cafe, washing away the grime of the streets and perhaps offering a symbolic cleansing of their shared past. Claire wiped away the tears with the back of her hands, struggling to regain her composure. The offer was overwhelming, a lifeline thrown to her in her darkest hour, and she clung to it with a desperate gratitude. The weight of her past, the years of hardship and isolation, seemed to lift momentarily, replaced by a fragile hope for a brighter future. "I accept," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly, "but on one condition. If at any point you feel like this isn't working, you let me know. I don't want to cause any more pain to anyone." Her words were a testament to her vulnerability and her genuine desire to heal, not to hurt, to contribute to the well-being of this fractured family, not to disrupt it further. Michael nodded, extending his hand to seal the agreement. A sense of relief washed over him, mingled with a touch of trepidation. He had made a decision that could dramatically alter the course of their lives, driven by a combination of compassion, a need to heal, and an undeniable pull towards this woman from his past. He couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah had somehow orchestrated this encounter, that there was a deeper purpose at play beyond their immediate circumstances. As their hands met, a spark of connection ignited between them, a fragile promise of hope in the face of uncertainty. At that moment, neither of them could have imagined how profoundly this decision would change their lives, nor the long-buried secrets that were about to surface, threatening to shatter their carefully constructed realities. The rain outside subsided, leaving behind a glistening city, washed clean and renewed, as if mirroring the potential for a fresh start within the cafe walls. But the calm was deceptive, a mere prelude to the storm that was brewing, a storm of revelations and emotional upheaval that would test the bonds of love, loyalty, and forgiveness. The past was not done with them yet. It was merely biding its time, waiting for the opportune moment to unleash its secrets. Claire's arrival at Michael's house took place on a Wednesday afternoon, after Michael had carefully prepared Emily for the news. He had chosen his words with the utmost care, emphasizing Claire's kindness and her connection to Emily's mother, hoping to ease any potential apprehension. To his surprise, Emily's reaction was one of unbridled joy. The little girl's face lit up with excitement as she saw Claire standing at the door with a small suitcase, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. The fear that Emily might reject this stranger, this woman from her mother's past, vanished in an instant, replaced by a wave of relief and a burgeoning sense of hope. It was as if Emily instinctively recognized something in Claire, a familiar warmth, a comforting presence that resonated with her on a deep, unspoken level. "Are you going to live with us?" Emily asked, her voice filled with wonder as she clutched her stuffed bunny. Claire knelt down to be at eye level with the little girl, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and trepidation. "Yes, Emily. Your dad invited me to take care of you. Is that okay with you?" The answer came in the form of a spontaneous hug that caught Claire completely off guard. The simple, pure gesture from the child dissolved the last vestiges of her self-doubt. washing away the years of hardship and isolation. Tears welled up in her eyes as she held Emily close, feeling a connection that transcended words, a bond forged in shared loss and the promise of a new beginning. Michael, observing the scene, felt a surge of emotion he couldn't quite name, a complex blend of relief, gratitude, and a profound sense of rightness. It was as if a missing piece of his life had finally fallen into place, bringing a sense of wholeness he had thought was lost forever. "Come on, I'll show you your room," Emily said, tugging on Claire's hand with an infectious enthusiasm. Daddy put flowers there just like Mommy liked. The guest room had been prepared with care. A vase of daisies, Sarah's favorites, adorned the bedside table, and the sheer curtains allowed the soft, afternoon light to filter into the room, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. It was a haven of peace, a stark contrast to the harsh realities Claire had been facing, a testament to Michael's thoughtfulness and his desire to provide her with a sense of comfort and belonging. As Claire stepped into the room, a wave of gratitude washed over her, mingled with a touch of disbelief at the sudden and miraculous turn of events in her life. Claire placed her small suitcase on the bed and looked around, still trying to fully absorb the drastic change in her circumstances. "There are clean towels in the bathroom," Michael explained, standing at the doorway, "and I bought some basic toiletries. If you need anything else." His voice trailed off, his gaze filled with a mixture of hope and a lingering uncertainty. He wanted to make her feel welcome, to erase the shadows of her past, but he also knew that this was just the beginning of a complex and delicate journey. "This is already so much more than I could have ever expected," Claire interrupted, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Michael." Her gratitude was profound, a heartfelt acknowledgement of the lifeline he had offered, the chance to reclaim her dignity and rebuild her shattered existence. "I promise you won't regret this." The first few days were a period of adjustment. Claire gradually integrated herself into the household routine, her presence initially tentative, but steadily growing more comfortable and natural. She woke up early to prepare breakfast, a task she hadn't performed in years, and discovered that she still remembered the recipes her grandmother had taught her, the comforting aromas of home-cooked meals filling the house with a warmth that had been absent for far too long. Emily blossomed under Claire's care, her laughter echoing through the halls, chasing away the lingering shadows of grief. The house, once filled with a quiet melancholy, began to resonate with a renewed sense of life and joy. Emily, who had previously spent hours quietly playing alone, now chattered incessantly, sharing stories from school and eagerly requesting Claire to read just one more story before bedtime. It was as if a light had been switched on inside her, chasing away the lingering shadows of her mother's absence. One afternoon, while Claire was helping Emily with an art project from school, the doorbell rang. It was Eleanor, who had not been informed about the new housemate. The shock on her face when she saw Claire sitting at the kitchen table with her granddaughter was palpable, a mixture of disbelief and a simmering disapproval that threatened to disrupt the newfound harmony. "Michael," she called out, her voice controlled but laced with a simmering tension, "can we talk in private?" The request hung in the air, heavy with unspoken disapproval and a sense of impending confrontation. The fragile peace that had settled over the household was threatened by Eleanor's arrival, her presence a reminder of the unresolved issues and the lingering shadows of the past. The atmosphere in the kitchen shifted, the warmth and joy replaced by a palpable unease. Emily, sensing the change, stopped her playful chatter and looked up at her father and grandmother with a worried expression. The undercurrents of family dynamics were about to surface, threatening to disrupt the newfound harmony. In the study, Eleanor barely waited for the door to close before confronting her son-in-law. "Have you lost your mind, bringing that woman into our home so close to my granddaughter?" Her voice was sharp, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Eleanor," Michael replied, his voice calm and measured, his composure carefully studied. "Claire needs help and Emily needs someone who can give her undivided attention. It's working well so far." He met her gaze directly, refusing to back down from the challenge. The battle lines were drawn, the clash between the past and the present about to erupt, with Emily's well-being hanging in the balance. "Until now?" Eleanor repeated, her voice dripping with incredulity. "You know nothing about her, about where she's been all these years, about why Sarah pushed her out of our lives." She paced the room, her agitation growing with each step. "You're jeopardizing Emily's safety, Michael, for some misguided sense of compassion." Her words were a direct challenge, a forceful attempt to undermine Michael's decision and reassert her control over the situation. The study, once a sanctuary of peace, had become a battleground, the air thick with accusations and the weight of unresolved history. "Then tell me," Michael countered, his voice rising slightly, his patience wearing thin. "Tell me exactly why Sarah cut off her best friend, because so far no one has given me a convincing explanation." He stepped closer to Eleanor, his gaze intense and unwavering. "I deserve to know the truth, Eleanor, no matter how painful it might be." The demand hung in the air, a challenge to the wall of silence that had surrounded Claire's disappearance, a desperate plea to finally understand the secrets that had haunted Sarah and now threatened to consume them all. Eleanor averted her gaze, her expression a complex mix of worry and internal conflict. The weight of her daughter's secret, the burden of her promise, and the fear of the consequences of revealing the truth warred within her. She knew that Michael deserved to know, that the truth had been buried for far too long, but the potential ramifications of its exposure terrified her. The fragile peace she had tried to maintain was crumbling, threatened by the relentless pursuit of answers and the reemergence of a past she desperately wanted to keep hidden. The room was filled with a suffocating tension, the air thick with unspoken words and the ghosts of forgotten memories. "I can't," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "I promised my daughter that I would keep her secrets, secrets that are affecting our lives even today." Her words were a plea, a desperate attempt to hold on to the past, to protect the memory of her daughter, even if it meant perpetuating the silence and the lies. But Michael was unwavering. "Sarah is gone, Eleanor," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "And these secrets, they aren't helping anyone. They're poisoning us from the inside out." His words hung in the air, a challenge to the wall of silence, a desperate plea for honesty and healing. From outside the study, the sound of Emily's laughter echoed through the house, a sweet and innocent melody that pierced the tense atmosphere. It was a sound that had become increasingly rare in recent months, a precious reminder of the joy that had been overshadowed by grief and loss. Her spontaneous happiness seemed to touch something deep within Eleanor, softening her resolve and momentarily breaking through the wall of resistance she had erected. The simple sound of her granddaughter's unadulterated joy was a powerful counterpoint to the heavy secrets and painful memories that filled the study, a reminder of the preciousness of life and the importance of healing. "Just promise me one thing," Eleanor said finally, her voice softer now, the edge of anger replaced by a plea. "Promise me you'll be careful, that you'll protect my granddaughter." The fierceness in her eyes had been replaced by a deep-seated fear, a primal instinct to safeguard her family from any potential harm. The walls of resistance were beginning to crumble, revealing the vulnerability beneath. The grandmother's unwavering love for Emily and her desperate desire to shield her from the darkness of the past. Michael, touched by her genuine concern, softened his own stance, recognizing the shared desire for Emily's well-being that transcended their conflicting perspectives. "Always," Michael replied firmly, his voice filled with unwavering determination. "I will always protect Emily." The promise hung in the air, a solemn vow exchanged between a grieving father and a worried grandmother, a shared commitment to the well-being of the little girl who had become the center of their fractured world. The tension in the room eased slightly, replaced by a fragile truce, a temporary ceasefire in the battle between the past and the present. But the underlying questions remained, the mysteries of Sarah's past, still shrouded in shadows, waiting to be unearthed. When Eleanor emerged from the study, she found Emily proudly displaying a drawing she had made for Claire. It was a simple representation of 3 figures holding hands, a small one, a tall one with dark hair, and another that appeared to have wings. "It's our family," Emily explained proudly. "Me, you, and Mommy watching over us from up there." Eleanor felt her heart clench, a pang of grief and a surge of protective love for her granddaughter. She observed in silence as Claire hugged Emily tightly, whispering something in her ear that made the little girl smile even brighter. For a fleeting moment, she saw her daughter in that gesture, the same tenderness, the same unwavering care. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Claire lay awake in her new room, gazing out the window at the unfamiliar landscape, the weight of the day's events, the unexpected turn her life had taken, and the lingering questions about the past swirled in her mind, keeping sleep at bay. On the table beside her bed, amidst the daisies, was a photograph of Sarah that Michael had placed there. It was a gesture she didn't yet know if comforted her or disturbed her, a poignant reminder of the complex web of emotions that connected them all. The past was intruding on her present, and she couldn't help but wonder what the future held. "Forgive me, Sarah," she whispered to the photograph, her voice barely audible. "I hope wherever you are, you understand why I came back." The words hung in the air, a silent plea for understanding and acceptance from the friend she had lost, the friend whose memory still held a powerful sway over her life. The decision to accept Michael's offer had been a leap of faith, a desperate attempt to reclaim her life and find a sense of belonging. But it also felt like a betrayal, a transgression against the unspoken promise she had made years ago. The conflict within her was a tempest of emotions, a battle between gratitude and guilt, hope and fear. After 2 weeks of living with Michael and Emily, Claire began to establish a routine that felt like a dream long forgotten. The mornings were filled with the comforting ritual of preparing breakfast, helping Emily get ready for school, and the simple act of sharing a meal together, a stark contrast to the lonely and uncertain days she had endured for so long. The afternoons were dedicated to activities with Emily, from assisting with homework to moments of pure joy in the backyard garden, a space that had once been Sarah's sanctuary and now bloomed with renewed life under Claire's care. The house was transforming, shedding its cloak of grief and embracing a fragile but growing sense of normalcy. One of those afternoons, while Emily was engrossed in painting with watercolors, Claire was organizing some old photographs that Michael had asked her to catalog. Among the images, she found one that made her freeze. It was a picture of her and Sarah, embracing in front of the College of Medicine building, both smiling and full of dreams. The vibrant young women in the photo were a stark contrast to the women they had become, their youthful optimism a poignant reminder of the paths not taken and the dreams deferred. A wave of nostalgia and a pang of sadness washed over Claire as she gazed at the faded image, a bittersweet reminder of the bond she had shared with Sarah and the life that had been so abruptly interrupted. "Aunt Claire," Emily's voice pulled her back to the present. "Look what I painted." The little girl held up a piece of paper with a colorful painting that depicted a garden full of flowers. In the center was a figure that resembled an angel with long, dark hair. "It's beautiful, Emily," Claire said, smiling and trying to hide the emotion in her voice. "Who's that angel?" "It's Mommy," Emily replied matter-of-factly. "She always loved flowers, right? Grandma told me." Claire nodded, remembering the countless times Sarah had dragged her to the botanical gardens on weekends. Her friend always said that flowers held secrets if you just knew how to listen. The memory was bittersweet, a reminder of the bond they had shared and the void that now remained. "Your mom loved daisies," Claire commented, picking up a brush and helping Emily add more details to the painting. "Did you know she used to make flower crowns when we were young?" Emily's eyes widened. "Really? Can you teach me how to make them?" "Of course I can." Claire smiled, but her smile faltered as she heard a familiar voice from the kitchen doorway. "I don't think it's appropriate for you to be telling stories about my daughter." Eleanor stood there, her expression tense and disapproving. "Emily, honey, go wash your hands for snack time." After the little girl left, Eleanor approached Claire, her voice low and sharp. "You may be living here now, but that doesn't give you the right to appropriate Sarah's memories." The fragile truce between them was shattered, the underlying tension resurfacing with a vengeance. "I'm not appropriating anything, Eleanor," Claire replied, her voice steady and calm, refusing to be drawn into a confrontation. "I'm simply sharing good memories with Emily. She deserves to know more about her mother." The accusation stung, but Claire held her ground, her conscience clear. She had no intention of replacing Sarah, only of honoring her memory and providing Emily with a deeper connection to her past. Eleanor's grief was understandable, but her possessiveness felt misplaced, a barrier to the healing process that Emily so desperately needed. The kitchen, once a haven of warmth and laughter, was now a battleground, the air thick with unspoken resentment and the weight of unresolved emotions. "Memories?" Eleanor scoffed, her voice laced with bitterness. "Like that last memory you left Sarah with, the one that made her cry for weeks." The words were like a slap, a sudden and brutal attack that caught Claire off guard. The color drained from her face and she stared at Eleanor in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't play innocent," Eleanor retorted, her eyes flashing with anger. "Sarah told me about that night, about what you did." The accusation hung in the air, a dark and ominous cloud threatening to unleash a storm of long-buried secrets and painful revelations. The past was no longer a distant memory. It had returned with a vengeance, ready to shatter the fragile peace that had been established. "Michael!" Claire's voice cut through the tension, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. "Michael!" She turned to him, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly. "What night, Eleanor?" she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. "What are you talking about? The last time I saw Sarah, she gave me that letter and asked me to leave. There was no night, no thing." Her voice trailed off, her brow furrowed in confusion as a sudden fragmented memory flickered at the edge of her consciousness. A distant echo of laughter, a swirl of music, a sense of disorientation. Her voice faltered as a sudden memory struck her. The graduation party, the dance, the moment when Sarah found her in the garden of the hall crying. But why? The memories were hazy, fragmented, as if a part of that night had been erased from her mind. A wave of nausea washed over her as she struggled to piece together the disjointed fragments, a growing sense of unease creeping into her heart. "There's something wrong with this whole story," Michael murmured, more to himself than to Claire. His eyes were dark with suspicion, his mind racing to reconcile the conflicting accounts and the gaping holes in the narrative. "Sarah was never one to hold a grudge," Michael said, his voice thoughtful. "She wasn't the type to push people away without a very strong reason. And you were her best friend, Claire. Something doesn't add up." He paced the kitchen, his mind racing to reconcile the conflicting accounts and the fragmented memories. The image of Sarah, his wife, his love, was being slowly chipped away, revealing a stranger beneath the surface, a woman shrouded in secrets and driven by unknown fears. The comfortable certainty he had clung to was dissolving, replaced by a growing unease and a desperate need for answers. Claire wiped away a stray tear, her hands trembling slightly. "Sometimes I think I should just leave," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emily doesn't deserve all this tension, all this darkness." The weight of the past, the burden of Eleanor's disapproval, and the growing complexity of the situation threatened to overwhelm her. She had come here seeking healing and a chance to rebuild her life, but she was beginning to feel like a catalyst for chaos, a disruptive force in a fragile family. The temptation to retreat, to disappear once again, was strong, but something held her back, a sense of unfinished business, a connection to Emily, and a nagging feeling that she was on the verge of uncovering a truth that could change everything. "No," Michael replied firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You're going to stay." He stepped closer to Claire, his gaze intense and unwavering. "Not just because Emily is happier than she's been in months, but because I need to understand what happened." He paused, his voice softening, a hint of vulnerability creeping in. "Sarah left us with more questions than answers, and something tells me that you're the key to understanding it all." The weight of the past, the mystery surrounding Sarah's actions, and the undeniable connection he felt to Claire compelled him to seek the truth, no matter how unsettling or painful it might be. At that moment, Emily came running back into the kitchen, her hands still damp from washing. "Aunt Claire, are we going to finish our painting?" she asked, her voice filled with childish enthusiasm. "I want to make more flowers for Mommy." Claire exchanged a look with Michael before smiling at the little girl. "Of course, sweetie. How about we learn how to paint daisies?" As she helped Emily with her brushstrokes, Claire couldn't help but notice Eleanor watching the scene from the living room, her face a mask of concern and something more, guilt. The realization sent a shiver down Claire's spine. What had happened that night of the graduation party that she couldn't remember? And why had Sarah, her best friend, harbored so much? Resentment that she made her own mother promise to keep secrets even after her death? The weekend arrived, bringing with it a fine and persistent rain that kept everyone indoors. Michael used the time to organize some old boxes in the attic, a task he had been putting off since Sarah's passing. Emily was happily occupied with her drawings in the living room, while Claire prepared hot chocolate in the kitchen. The sweet aroma of the drink stirred a wave of memories, a poignant reminder of the cozy evenings she and Sarah had spent together during their college years, huddled over textbooks and sharing secrets. The warmth of the kitchen, the laughter of the child, and the scent of familiar comfort created a haven from the gloom outside, a space where the past and the present intertwined in a delicate dance of grief and healing. Claire was so absorbed in her memories that she didn't notice Michael descending the attic stairs, carrying a dusty box. "Look what I found," he said, placing the box on the kitchen table. "It's stuff from Sarah's college days. I thought you might like to see it." Claire approached hesitantly as Michael opened the box. Inside were notebooks, loose photos, and a diary with a brown leather cover that she recognized immediately. "This diary," Claire murmured, touching the cover gently. "I gave it to her in our sophomore year of college." The familiar object was a tangible link to the past, a relic of their shared youth and the bond that had once been so strong. A wave of nostalgia washed over her, mingled with a sense of trepidation as she wondered what secrets it might contain. Michael picked up the diary, turning it over in his hands. "I've never seen this before. Sarah kept some diaries, but this..." He opened it to a random page and began to read silently. His expression gradually changed, shifting from curiosity to confusion. "Claire," he said after a few moments, his voice tense, "I think you need to see this." He handed her the diary. With trembling hands, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and a dawning realization. The atmosphere in the kitchen shifted, the cozy warmth replaced by a growing sense of unease as the past threatened to unleash its secrets. She took the diary with trembling hands and began to read the entry that Michael indicated. Today was a difficult day. The tests didn't show any improvement, and Dr. Santos was clear. "I need to start preparing myself." Claire has been so present, so dedicated to her neurology studies. If she only knew. Sometimes I want to tell her everything about the headaches, about the hidden tests, but I can't. She would drop everything to take care of me. I know her heart, and I can't let her sacrifice her dreams. Not again. Claire felt the air escape her lungs. What is she talking about? What tests? Michael continued to flip through the diary, stopping at another entry a few months later. Eleanor found out today. She found the results of the MRI in my room. It was hard to convince her not to tell anyone, especially Claire. Mom insists that she has the right to know, that she's my best friend, but that's exactly why I need to protect her. Claire has already lost so much in her life caring for Grandpa. I can't be another burden. Claire gasped, tears streaming down her face. It can't be. She was sick all that time? Michael continued turning the pages until he reached an entry that made his heart stop. The tumor has grown. Dr. Santos says I have options, but they're all risky. Claire is so excited about her neurology residency, talking about new treatments, new hopes. The irony is too cruel. She could help me. I know she could, but the price would be too high for her, for me, for everyone. Sometimes loving someone means letting them go. Stop, Michael, Claire exclaimed, slamming the diary shut. I can't believe this. Aunt Claire? Emily's voice came from the kitchen doorway. Are you crying? Claire quickly wiped away, her tears forcing a smile. It's nothing, sweetie. I just got something in my eye. Do you want some hot chocolate? Emily ran to hug her, offering the pure and comforting embrace that only children can give. Grandma always cries when she sees pictures of Mommy, too. She says it's normal to miss her. Michael watched the scene, his mind racing to process the revelations of the diary. Sarah had a brain tumor. She had been sick all that time, hiding it from everyone, especially from Claire. But why? What else was hidden within those pages?